Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about function behavior. And when I mention function behavior, what I'm referring to is what the graph looks like in certain areas. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on end behavior, increasing and decreasing function, and whether or not the function is less than or greater than 0 at certain areas in the graph. All right, so we're going to start off by talking about end behavior, and we're going to be doing that for two graphs. So let's start with our first graph. So when I mention end behavior, it's exactly what it sounds like. What is the graph doing at its ends? So on the very right side and on the very left side. And so the way that we write this is what is happening as x approaches positive infinity, and that's the right side of the graph, and what is happening as x approaches negative infinity, and that's the left side of the graph. All right, so as x approaches positive infinity, so going to the right, notice that y or f of x is going up. So as x approaches positive infinity, f of x also approaches positive infinity because, again, f of x is going up, or y value is going up. All right, so as x approaches negative infinity, so as it goes to the left, notice that the graph or y value is going down, which means that f of x approaches negative infinity. All right, so let's do end behavior for our second graph to make sure that we understand. Again, we are always going to be focused on what happens as x approaches positive infinity, that's to the right, and what happens as x approaches negative infinity, that's to the left. So notice that as our graph goes to the right, it goes down, which means our function is going down. So as x approaches positive infinity, f of x is approaching negative infinity. Again, that's because it's going down. And as x goes to the left, or f of x is going down. So as the graph goes to the left, it's going down, which means that f of x is still approaching negative infinity. All right, so now we're ready to talk about increasing and decreasing functions. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Where's the graph going up and where is it going down? Increasing means going up like this, from left to right. It's going up here, and it's also going up here. So let's talk about where the function is increasing. So that pink part that I just traced, that's where our function is increasing. Now, if you look at the x-coordinates here, the x-coordinate is 0.91. It is increasing everywhere before that x-coordinate. So our function, f of x, is increasing when x is less than negative 0.91, and I'm rounding here. So it's also increasing, notice it's also increasing to the right of that point. So it's increasing here. And so we would write, and when x is greater than 0.91. So those are the two areas of our graph where our function is increasing. Now in gray, I'm going to trace where our function is decreasing. So it's decreasing in between those values. So in between those two values that we just saw from left to right. So our function, f of x, is decreasing in between, and the way we write in between is that x is greater than negative 0.91 and less than 0.91. So it's in between those values, or function that you can see in gray is decreasing. All right, so let's look at increasing and decreasing the intervals in our next graph. So let's do in pink again. We see our graph is going up here, and it's also going up here in pink. So from left to right, our function is increasing in those areas that I just traced in pink. And so the coordinate here is negative 1.37 approximately. So everywhere before that, our graph was increasing. So f of x was increasing when x is less than negative 1.37. And also when x is between those two values. So when x, and remember when it's between, we do our notation in that way. So between negative 0.5 and 0.37. All right. Now increasing, that's what we just did. So now we're going to be doing decreasing, which I will trace in gray. So the graph is decreasing here in gray, and it's also decreasing here. So it's f of x is decreasing between negative, so right here, between negative 1.37. So again, we put that, negative 1.37 and negative 0.5. All right, so making sure you see that, that's negative 0.5, that's negative 1.37, and it's decreasing in between. It's also increasing, so the next place where I have that gray mark, it's also increasing after x is 0.37. So the way we write that is when x is greater than 0.37. All right, so now we've looked at end behavior and we've looked at increasing and decreasing function. And so now all we have left is to look at where the function itself is less than or greater than 0. And so that's just a fancy way of saying where is the graph higher than the x-axis, because the x-axis is that 0 mark. So where is our graph higher? I'll trace this in blue. Higher than the blue. That's where our graph is greater than 0. And where is it lower than the blue? And again, we are focusing on describing it using our x coordinates as the intervals. So we can see, I'll use yellow, we can see that it's lower here, and we can see that it's lower here. And so now we can describe those intervals. So x, that is impossible to read, so I will write in something you can see. All right, the function f of x is less than 0. So that's, the graph is lower than that x-axis when x is less than negative 1.67. So again, that is that yellow section that I just traced. The graph is lower than the x-axis when x is less than that number. It's also lower in between those two values. Now it looks like I don't have coordinates for that number here. I guess I do, it's right here. So in between 0.2, I can't see here, so let's make sure we can. All right, so in between 0.2, I'll just say 0.2 for short, and it looks like I don't have coordinates for that value. So let's just mark this off as 1.5. This is just an estimate, just for the sake of this video. So it's also f of x is less than 0 when x is between 0.2 and 1.5. All right, and now we can do our last section for this and talk about where our function is greater than 0. So I'm going to use another color. Let's use orange. All right, our function is greater than 0 here, and it's also greater than 0 here. All right, so again, this is where the graph is higher than the x-axis. So it's greater than 0 between that value and that value. So that's between, let's write this first, is greater than 0 when when x is between negative 0.67, so that's there, negative 1.67, and 0.2. All right, so this video is running a little bit long as is. So instead of going through this whole problem, I will just show you the yellow. That's where the graph is less than 0, where the function is less than 0. The orange, that's where the function is greater than 0. And so you would describe the intervals of the yellow and the orange just like we did above. All right, and so that's how we work with function behavior.